I will never forget what happened at my daughter's wedding. The man who claimed to love her shoved my face into the cake in front of everyone. I heard laughter. I heard mocking. I saw my daughter lower her gaze. And I just stood there swallowing shame and sugar until a single sentence changed the color of that man's face. And on that day, he discovered who I really am. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel. Every day there is a new story that could be yours, or your father's, or that of someone you know. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from. My name is Lawrence Miller, and I am 72 years old. What I am going to tell you happened at my daughter's wedding, and I still find it hard to believe it was real. I arrived at the banquet hall in my usual suit. It is the same one I use for important occasions. It is not a designer brand, and it has no fancy labels, but it is clean and well ironed, and I bought it with honest money more than 10 years ago. In my inside pocket, I carried my father's watch. It was the only object I had left of him when he died. I planned to give it to Rachel as a wedding gift because that watch survived the poverty of my childhood and the hard work and the years of sacrifice. I thought she would understand its value, but as soon as I crossed the door of the hall, everything started to go wrong. At the entrance, there was a guy in a black suit with a list in his hand. He looked me up and down, stopping at my shoes and my suit and my tie. He frowned as if something bothered him. I told him my name clearly, Lawrence Miller, father of the bride. He ran his finger down the page once and twice and 3 times without finding it. I do not see it. He told me without looking me in the eyes, "Are you sure you were invited?" I felt the blood rising to my face. "I am the father of the bride," I repeated. He sighed and kept looking, and finally found it at the bottom of the list, almost in the margin, written in smaller letters than the others. He pointed to the back of the room without saying another word. I walked among the tables decorated with white flowers and silk tablecloths, feeling the guests' stares piercing my clothes. A woman whispered something to her husband as I passed by her. He turned to look at me and let out a little laugh. My table was next to the kitchen door in the farthest corner of the room. Every time a waiter went in or out, the door swung open and hit the back of my chair. At the table there were 3 people I did not know. A young couple whispering to each other, and a man who did not look up from his cell phone. "Good evening," I said to them as I sat down. None of them answered. I looked toward the front of the room and saw my ex-wife Amanda at the main table, laughing with the groom's parents as if they were family for a lifetime. She did not even turn to look at me. Then I saw him approaching. Gavin Foster, my daughter's fiancé, was walking among the tables, shaking hands and receiving congratulations. When he reached my table, the smile was erased from his face. He looked at me for a few seconds without saying anything, as if he were evaluating what to do with me. Then he spoke loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I hope you behave yourself tonight and do not cause problems. Stay in your place and do not go near the main table. Understood?" He did not shake my hand. He did not say welcome. He just looked at me, expecting me to feel small, and when I did not, he turned around and left. A man at the next table looked at me with pity. That hurt more than Gavin's words. I squeezed my father's watch inside my pocket until the metal dug into my palm. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "I am here for Rachel," I told myself. "Only for her." I looked for her and found her on the other side of the room, surrounded by friends adjusting her veil. She looked beautiful. The white dress fell as if it had been made just for her. I wanted to get up and go hug her and tell her I was proud, and that I loved her. But then I noticed something that stopped me. She was looking everywhere, greeting all the guests, but never, not even once, did she turn toward where I was. It was as if she knew exactly where they had seated me, and was avoiding looking in that direction. The civil ceremony was quick. The judge read a few sentences. They signed. Everyone applauded. I applauded too, although my hands felt heavy. Then came the speeches. Gavin's father took the microphone and spoke for 15 minutes. "My son is an example of hard work. He built his company from scratch. I am proud of him." Every word made my stomach turn. Gerald Foster. 20 years ago, that man was my business partner. 20 years ago, he stole a contract worth millions from me and disappeared without showing his face. But I never reported him because when I finally had proof to do so, Rachel was already Gavin's girlfriend. I did not want my daughter to carry that shame. The time came for the cake. 5 tiers of sponge cake and cream decorated with sugar flowers. Gavin took the microphone and said before cutting it, "I want to do something special, something that no one will forget." My blood ran cold. I do not know why, but I felt something bad was going to happen. I want to invite the father of the bride to taste the first bite, he said, pointing at me. It is the least I can do for the man who gave life to my wife. Some applauded. A woman at my table nudged me. Get up, they are calling you. I walked toward the front of the room, feeling all eyes on me. Gavin was waiting for me next to the cake with a smile I did not like at all. When I arrived, he put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was strong, almost painful. Thanks for coming, he said in a low voice, only for me to hear. Then he took a plate with a large piece of cake and brought it close to my face. I thought he was going to give it to me in my hand. I thought it was a gesture of peace, but instead he shoved my face directly into the cream with all his strength. I felt the cold frosting in my eyes and in my nose and in my mouth. I could not breathe. I could not see. I heard laughter explode around me. Someone shouted, "That is how you feed beggars." And I stood there paralyzed with my face buried in the cake, unable to move. I straightened up slowly. The cream was dripping down my face and falling inside the collar of my suit. My eyes burned from the sugar. I looked for Rachel desperately. I found her at the back of the room, with her gaze fixed on the floor. She was not laughing, but she was not moving either. She said nothing. She did nothing. Next to her, Amanda looked at me with that expression of contempt I knew so well. Gavin was still next to me, smiling for the photos. "Smile, father-in-law," he told me. "It is a joke. Do not be bitter." The camera flashes blinded me. The laughter continued, and there I was with cream dripping down my neck, swallowing shame and sugar, not knowing what to do. Then I saw something that broke my soul. My brother Stephen was at one of the center tables, raising his glass to Gavin. He was laughing with his mouth open, banging on the table with his hand. My own brother, the same one I lent money to when he lost everything, the same one I defended when no one wanted to help him. I screamed at him with my eyes, hoping he would see me and understand. But he was not looking at me. He was looking at Gavin and yelling at him. "Good one, buddy, good one." And he clinked his glass with those next to him. I felt something break inside me, something that could not be repaired. I turned around and walked toward the exit. I was leaving a trail of cream on the marble floor. I heard the murmurs behind my back and the poorly disguised giggles. I reached almost to the door when something made me stop. I felt a different gaze. I turned and saw an older man at a nearby table with white hair and an elegant suit and a penetrating gaze. He was not laughing, and he was not murmuring. He was just watching me intently, as if he knew something everyone else ignored. Our eyes met for a second, and in his look, for the first time all night, I saw something that was not mockery or contempt. I saw recognition. I needed to clean myself up. I had cream in my ears and between my fingers and stuck to my neck. Every time I breathed, I got the sweet smell of frosting mixed with my humiliation. I asked a waiter where the restroom was. "At the end of the hallway." He told me without looking at me, as if I were contagious. I walked fast with my head down, feeling the cream dry on my skin. I just wanted cold water on my face. 5 minutes alone. But before reaching the bathroom, I heard footsteps behind me. Quick, determined footsteps. I turned around and saw him. Gavin was walking toward me with that smile I was already learning to hate. He grabbed my arm and spun me toward him. "Where do you think you are going?" he asked me. "To clean myself." He shook his head. "That bathroom is not for you. It is for the real guests." He pointed to a narrow door at the end of the hall next to the kitchen. "Use the service bathroom. That is where you belong." He said it loudly without lowering his tone. At that moment, 2 women were walking down the hall. They stopped when they heard him. One of them, a blonde in a red dress, let out a giggle and whispered something to the other. The other looked away but said nothing. Nobody said anything. Gavin stood in front of me with his arms crossed, waiting for me to obey. "What?" he said. "You did not hear me." "The service bathroom. Over there." I felt my blood boil. I clenched my fists. For a second I thought about confronting him and telling him everything I thought of him and his family of thieves. I thought about smashing his face with a punch. But then I thought of Rachel in her white dress, and the day that was supposed to be the happiest of her life. If I made a scene, she would carry that shame forever. So I let out the air and unclenched my fists and walked toward the service bathroom without saying a word. I heard Gavin's laugh behind my back. "That is how I like it," he said. "Understanding your place." The 2 women laughed with him. I pushed open the service bathroom door and went in. It was a tiny room that stank of bleach and kitchen grease, with a rust-stained sink, and a cracked mirror, and a cheap roll of toilet paper on the tank. I closed the door and stayed alone in that miserable room. Outside the party music could be heard, but inside only the dripping of the faucet and the noise of my own thoughts. Calm down, I told myself. Breathe. This will not last forever. I turned on the faucet, and the water came out ice cold. I scrubbed my face hard, trying to remove the cream and the sensation of the laughter that still resonated in my ears. I looked up at the cracked mirror and saw a man I barely recognized. Red eyes, ruined suit, 72 years old, hotels in 6 countries, millions in the bank. And there I was, cleaning myself in a service bathroom. You did not raise a coward. I thought of my father. But there I was, letting a brat treat me like trash. I left the bathroom and walked back to the hall. The music had changed to something more upbeat. Couples were dancing on the floor, laughing as if nothing had happened. No one looked at me when I re-entered. It was as if I had ceased to exist. I went to my table next to the kitchen and sat in silence. The 3 strangers continued with their business. The cell phone and the whispers and the cold food. None of them spoke to me. Are you okay? I wanted someone to ask me, but no one asked. No one noticed. Or maybe they did notice, but they did not care. Then I saw my brother Stephen get up from his table with 2 glasses of champagne. He walked over to where Gavin was and handed him one. To the wittiest groom I know, Stephen shouted, raising his glass. Gavin laughed and clinked glasses with him. He patted him on the back as if they were lifelong friends. Thanks, buddy, Gavin told him. I knew you would appreciate the joke. Stephen laughed louder. I almost choked on laughter. The face the old man made was priceless. I felt something squeeze my chest. My own brother calling me the old man and laughing at me with the man who had just humiliated me. Amanda passed near my table on her way to the restroom. She did not look at me, but I looked at her. She was wearing the diamond earrings I gave her 30 years ago when we were still happy. I remembered the night we signed the divorce, the lawyer reading the clauses, she asking for the house and the car and the accounts and custody. My lawyer telling me, Lawrence, fight, you have a right to half. But I shook my head. If this goes to court, Rachel will suffer, I told him. I sign everything. And I signed. Every page and every clause. I lost everything so my daughter would not suffer. And now my daughter would not even look at me. The music changed to a slow song. I saw Rachel and Gavin walk to the floor for their first dance. He took her by the waist. She rested her head on his shoulder. They moved slowly while the guests took photos. My daughter looked happy. Or that is what I wanted to believe. But I knew her. I knew every gesture of her face since she was a baby. And I recognized that look. It was the same one she had as a child when something worried her and she did not know how to say it. At that moment I understood something with absolute clarity. My daughter was not happy. She was trapped. And the man holding her in his arms did not love her. He only wanted what he believed I was hiding. The song ended and the guests applauded the newlyweds. Rachel smiled and thanked them with a small bow. But I knew that smile better than anyone. It was the same one she put on as a child when something worried her, and she did not want anyone to notice. A smile that did not reach her eyes and stayed on her lips like a mask. Her shoulders were tense and her jaw tight. Now I told myself is the time to approach. I needed to hug her even for a second. Tell her in her ear that I loved her, that I was proud of her, that despite everything that had happened that night, I was still her father, and always would be. I got up from the table, feeling my legs heavy like concrete columns, and walked toward the dance floor with my heart beating against my ribs so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I did not even make it halfway. Gavin appeared out of nowhere and planted himself in front of me like a brick wall. He had his arms crossed over his chest and looked down at me with that expression of disgust that was already too familiar to me. "Where are you going?" he asked me, although it was obvious he already knew. To congratulate my daughter, I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. I just want to hug her for a moment. He let out a short, dry laugh that froze my blood. Today is Rachel's day, not yours. He told me loudly so everyone could hear. You already caused enough pity with your little cake stunt. The best thing you can do is go back to your corner and stay quiet the rest of the night. Understood? Every word came out of his mouth like poisoned spit. I tried to go around him to pass, but he moved to block me again. Then he did something that left me paralyzed. He put his hand on my chest and pushed me back. It was not a strong blow, but the intention was clear as water. He was marking his territory, showing me who was in charge there, making it clear that I was nobody at that party. I looked over his shoulder, searching for Rachel. She was a few yards away, talking to some friends. She must have heard everything because she turned toward us and our eyes met for a second. I saw something in her eyes that could have been shame or pleading, I am not sure. But immediately she looked away and continued conversing, as if I did not exist, and as if the man who taught her to ride a bicycle was an invisible ghost. Then I heard a voice behind me that pierced me like a knife. It was Amanda, that voice that 40 years ago seemed the sweetest in the world to me and now cut like broken glass. She approached with firm steps and stood next to Gavin, forming a united front against me. She looked me up and down with that contempt she perfected during our years of marriage and said the words that still resonate in my head. I should have removed you from Rachel's life a long time ago. You were the worst mistake of my life, Lawrence. If you have an ounce of dignity, leave at once, and stop embarrassing your own daughter on the most important day of her existence. Gavin nodded, satisfied to have reinforcements in his war against me. I stayed silent. Not because I did not have words, because I had many, all burning in my throat, wanting to come out. I stayed silent because I knew that anything I said was going to be used against me. Amanda was always an expert at that, at twisting everything I said until turning it into a weapon that stabbed me back. And Gavin was there, enjoying every second of the show with that smile of satisfaction that made me nauseous. I felt bile rise in my throat. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw hurt. I am not going to give them the pleasure, I thought. I am not going to explode here. I took a step back, and then another, and turned around to walk toward my table. I heard Amanda say something else behind my back, probably another insult, but I did not want to hear it. While I walked among the tables, I thought about the day I signed the divorce. My lawyer begged me to fight for my rights, but I shook my head. I did not want Rachel to suffer months of hearings watching her parents destroy each other. So I signed everything. The house where I saw her first steps, the accounts I filled working for years, the custody that let me see her one weekend a month if I was lucky. The only thing I did not sign over was my company, that I kept in silence under another name because it was the only thing I had left to keep breathing every morning. I arrived at my table and let myself fall into the chair. The three strangers continued ignoring me. A waiter passed nearby. "Are you okay, sir?" he asked me. "Yes," I lied. "I just need a moment." I did not want anyone to see me as a victim, but sitting there with the smell of cake on my suit and Amanda's words burning me inside, it was impossible to feel any other way. I thought about everything I had kept quiet for 2 decades. The betrayal of Gerald Foster, the lies they fed Rachel, making her believe I had abandoned her for another woman. I never defended myself publicly, because every time I was about to speak I saw my daughter's face and told myself it was not worth it, but silence charges a price. I paid it with years of distance and unanswered calls and birthdays where my gift arrived by mail. I chose to be invisible to protect Rachel, and now she looked at me as if I were worth nothing. I squeezed my father's watch inside my pocket until I felt the metal mark the palm of my hand. Give it to her anyway, I thought. Get up, walk to where she is, and put the watch in her hand without saying anything. But something stopped me before I could move. It was not fear of Gavin or Amanda. It was something much worse than fear. It was the absolute certainty, the total conviction that Rachel would not want it. That she would see it as the gift of a poor man and throw it in a drawer to forget it. Because that is what everyone in that room believed I was. A nobody. A failure with nothing to offer. And none of them knew that I had chosen that silence on purpose, that I had signed it with my own hand so my daughter would not suffer. But silence has a price, and that night it was starting to charge me with very high interest. Minutes passed, and no one approached my table. It was as if they had drawn an invisible circle around me that no human being wanted to cross, as if I had a contagious disease. Waiters came and went with silver trays loaded with elegant food, but when they reached my area they sped up and looked the other way as if I did not exist. At some point they left a plate with steak and mashed potatoes in front of me that looked expensive, but I did not have the stomach to taste even a bite. I picked up the fork to do something, and started moving the food from one side to the other, making furrows in the puree like a bored child, watching the meat juice spread across the plate like a dark stain. Outside of me, everything was a party. Inside of me, everything was a deafening silence. From that cursed table next to the kitchen, I could see the entire room as if they had put me there on purpose so I would see everything I was missing and suffer watching it. The main tables where Gavin's family laughed out loud and raised champagne glasses every 5 minutes. The dance floor where couples moved embraced under the golden lights that gave them an almost magical glow. The newlyweds' table elevated on a platform like a throne, where Rachel and Gavin received guests who approached to congratulate them with effusive hugs and gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Everyone belonged to that place. Everyone was part of something important. Except me sitting next to the kitchen door like an old piece of furniture that no one knows where to put and no one cares about. If you are listening to this story right now, I ask you to write in the comments what part of the world you are watching me from. Because that night, in that hall full of elegant people and fake laughter, I felt more alone than ever in my entire life of 72 years. More alone than when I buried my father and returned to a completely empty house where no one was waiting for me. More alone than when I signed the divorce and drove back to an unfurnished apartment where the walls echoed. The hall was full of laughter and happy music and animated conversations everywhere, and I was completely empty inside. As if someone had scooped out everything I had inside with a spoon, and only the hollow shell of a man who once had a family that loved him remained. Then I felt something that pulled me out of that dark pit I was sinking into. A small, warm, soft hand touching my arm carefully. I looked down surprised and saw a boy of about 6 or 7 years old, looking at me with huge eyes full of innocent curiosity. He had black hair combed with gel and a blue suit that was too big for him, probably inherited from an older cousin. "Mister," he said to me with that high-pitched voice of children, "are you okay?" The question hit me in the chest like a punch. Just like that, so direct, so simple as only children know how to ask. I smiled at him the best I could, although it cost me enormous effort, and told him yes, that I was just a little tired, nothing more. He looked at me a few more seconds with those eyes that seemed to see through my lies, and then ran off toward his mom. I watched him zigzagging between the tables with the happy and carefree clumsiness of children who do not know the pain of the adult world. And then I felt something break inside my chest with a crack I could almost hear. A child who did not know me at all, a complete stranger of 6 years old, had noticed that I was doing badly. A child had more empathy in 30 seconds than all the adults in that elegant hall all damn night. I felt my eyes burn, and I had to blink fast several times, so no tear would escape in front of everyone. It was not just sadness I felt in that moment. It was something deeper, heavier, darker. It was the brutal confirmation that I had lost the game, that all my years of silence and sacrifice had been completely useless. I looked up and saw it with perfect clarity. Sitting at the head table with a glass of champagne and a satisfied smile was Gerald Foster Gavin's father, the man who 20 years ago was my partner and my best friend. More than 2 decades ago, we planned my first hotel together for 3 years, until one day I arrived at the office and found everything empty. He had taken every document, forged my signature, and put the project in his name. The hotel was built with my money and my ideas, but with his name on the deed. I was left on the street with a huge debt. I never reported him because when I had the proof, Rachel was already Gavin's girlfriend. Now, watching him toast at the head table while I was cornered next to the kitchen, I felt something very old waking up inside me. Rage. A cold rage rising from my guts. 20 years of swallowing the truth while he built his empire on what he stole from me. 20 years protecting him without him knowing. And there he was laughing with my ex-wife, applauding his son who had just humiliated me, living the life that should have been mine. I clenched my fists under the table so hard I felt my knuckles crack and my nails dig into my palms. I breathed deep, once, twice, 3 times, trying to calm the volcano boiling inside me and threatening to explode. It is not worth it, I told myself with gritted teeth. Making a scene is only going to make everything worse. Rachel would never forgive me. But for the first time in 20 long years, I was not sure I could contain myself much longer. For the first time, the silence I chose as a protective shield was starting to feel like a noose around my neck, choking me slowly. And as I watched Gerald Foster raise his champagne glass in another triumphant toast, I knew in the deepest part of my being that something was about to change that night. Something that had been waiting 2 decades to come to light, only I still did not know what terrible form it was going to take when it finally exploded. I was about to get up and leave once and for all when I felt a presence by my side. It was not a sound or a specific movement. It was something more subtle than that, like when someone watches you intently, and your body perceives it before your eyes do, like a 6th sense activating. I turned slowly, preparing for another humiliation, and saw the man who had been watching me since I wiped the cake off my face. the one with white hair combed back, and the perfectly cut, elegant suit. Now he was standing next to my table with his hands in his trouser pockets, and an expression I could not decipher at that moment. He looked at me intently as if he had known me all his life, although I could not place that face in any file of my memory. He had the bearing of someone important, someone used to being listened to when he speaks and obeyed when he orders. He sat in the empty chair in front of me without asking permission, as if he owned the place, or as if we had a scheduled appointment I had forgotten. He crossed his legs naturally and adjusted his jacket with an elegant movement, as if he had all the time in the world and no rush to be anywhere else. Then he smiled slightly, and in that smile I saw something that was strangely familiar, a spark of recognition I could not identify immediately. "Lawrence Miller," he said, pronouncing my full name, slowly savoring every syllable as if they were candy. "Do you not remember me any more?" I stared at him, trying to remember, searching desperately in the dusty files of my head for some clue of where I knew that wrinkled but distinguished face. And then, like lightning illuminating everything, it hit me all at once. Bernard Owens. 30 years ago, Bernard was one of my first partners in the hotel business. But not like Gerald, who betrayed me in the worst possible way. Bernard was one of the good ones, one of the few left in this world who keep their word to the ultimate consequences, and look you in the eye when they shake your hand to close a deal. We worked together on 2 successful hotel projects in Central America before he decided to retire to care for his wife, who had fallen gravely ill. After that, we lost contact, as happens sometimes in life when everyone takes their own path, but I always remembered him with respect and genuine affection. That he was now there sitting in front of me on the worst night of my entire existence, looking at me with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see much further than the dried cream on my neck and the humiliation etched on my face. "What are you doing here, sitting like a dog, Lawrence?" He asked me point blank, straight to the point, without anesthesia or softness. "Did you forget who you are?" His voice was calm but firm as a rock, with that tone fathers have when they scold their children with affection but with authority. The question took me by surprise, and I did not know what to answer at first. "I do not know what you are talking about, Bernard," I finally told him with a weak voice. "I am just another guest at my daughter's wedding, nothing special." He let out a short, dry laugh, shaking his head as if I had said the stupidest thing in the world. "Stop playing humble with me, Lawrence," he said, leaning forward. "I know perfectly well who you are. I have followed your career all these years. I know about your hotels, your growth, everything you have built in silence while the world believes you are a failure with nothing." I felt the air get stuck in my throat, and my heart stopped for a second. No one knew about my hotels. Absolutely no one. I had spent entire decades building my company under another corporate name, living with extreme austerity, driving an old car that was over 15 years old, wearing simple clothes without brands, not because I was stingy or greedy, but because of principles my father instilled in me since I was a boy. He always told me that true power is in what no one sees, not in what you show off to the world like a peacock. But Bernard knew everything. "I have contacts in the hotel world all over Latin America," he explained as if reading my thoughts. "Your name appears in records very few know. I put the pieces together years ago and knew it was you behind all that." He paused and looked me straight in the eye. "So tell me, why the hell are you letting an arrogant brat treat you like trash in front of everyone?" I did not know what to answer to that. I remained in absolute silence, looking at the table, feeling a deep shame that someone knew the truth about my fortune, and yet had seen me humiliated in that pathetic way with my face buried in a cake like a circus clown. Bernard leaned further forward and lowered his voice to almost a whisper so no one else could hear us. "Listen to me well, Lawrence," he said in a grave tone. "I am at this wedding because Gerald Foster invited me. We are business acquaintances, although not friends. I never liked that guy, but there is something you need to know." He made a dramatic pause that made my hair stand on end. "I have heard things about Gavin that will interest you a lot. Things that have to do with your daughter and your supposed assets. Things that will hurt you, but that it is better you know now, and not later when it is too late." "What are you talking about?" I asked him, feeling my heart beating faster and stronger like a war drum. He put his hand in the inside pocket of his elegant jacket and took out a latest model cell phone which he put on the table between us. "A waiter I trust passed me this information a few hours ago," he explained as he unlocked the screen with his fingerprint. "At first I did not give it importance because I did not know who you were in all this. But when I saw you arrive at the wedding and recognized you, I knew immediately I had to show it to you." He started looking for something among his files while I looked at him without understanding anything of what was happening, with my heart beating so hard in my chest I could hear it pounding in my own ears like thunder. Finally, he found what he was looking for and turned the phone toward me so I could see the screen clearly. But before I could see what was on the screen, I raised my hand to stop him. "Wait," I told him, "before showing me that I need to know what you plan to do with this information." Bernard looked at me with a serious, almost solemn expression and nodded slowly as if approving my question. "That depends entirely on you, Lawrence," he replied with a firm voice. "I can go up on that stage right now, take the microphone, and tell this entire room who you really are. I can destroy Gavin and his father in 5 minutes with the pure truth without needing to invent anything." He paused, to let his words settle in my head. "But I also understand that could hurt your daughter a lot, and that is why I want to ask you first before acting. Are you willing to stop hiding once and for all, or do you prefer to keep being the invisible ghost everyone thinks you are?" I looked toward the newlyweds table, searching for Rachel with my eyes. She was talking to one of her bridesmaids, smiling automatically and mechanically as if playing a role in a play someone else had written for her without asking if she wanted to act. I cannot do that to her, I thought with a tight heart. I cannot destroy her wedding in front of all her friends and guests. I thought about what it would mean for her to find out the truth in front of 200 people with their cell phones recording everything. The public scandal, the shame that would haunt her for years, the cruel headlines in gossip magazines, her wedding completely ruined because of her father, the same man who, according to her, had abandoned her 20 years ago for another woman. I could not do that to my own daughter. It did not matter how much they had humiliated me that night. I could not be the one to destroy the most important day of her life. "No," I finally told Bernard, shaking my head. "I do not want you to go up on stage. I prefer to leave in silence and let my daughter live her lie if that makes her happy, at least for tonight." He looked at me for several long seconds without saying absolutely anything, as if evaluating my answer, weighing it, judging it. Then he nodded slowly with a thoughtful expression. "I respect your decision, Lawrence," he told me with a grave voice. "But before you leave here, you need to see what I have on this phone. After seeing it, if you still want to shut up and leave without doing anything, I swear I will not stop you, but at least you have to know the complete truth of what is happening before making such an important decision. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your daughter." I took the cell phone with hands trembling like leaves in the wind. The screen showed a text message conversation between two contacts, saved as Gavin and Dad. I started reading from the beginning and felt my stomach turn with every line my eyes processed as if I were swallowing poison. They were talking about me. They were talking about my supposed hidden inheritance. They were talking about how they were going to keep all my money when I died. "The old man must have millions stored somewhere," Gavin wrote. "Rachel is our ticket to that fortune," Gerald responded with calculated coldness. "Have patience, son. Play your cards right. Your wife is a fool. She suspects absolutely nothing of our plan." And as I read those poisonous words over and over, I felt something very deep inside me break forever, unable to be repaired. I read the complete conversation and felt sick. There it was, all written in black and white, impossible to deny. Gavin did not love my daughter. To him, Rachel was just a means to get to my money. I filled her head with stories about his supposed abandonment. He wrote, "I told her he left with another woman and never cared. That he left her like trash. It was easy to manipulate her. All lies. All invented. And Rachel had believed it word for word because it came from the man who claimed to love her. They manipulated her from day one." Bernard watched me in total silence from the other side of the table, waiting patiently for my reaction without pressuring me. I returned the phone without saying a single word because none came out. My mouth was completely dry and my hands shook uncontrollably as if I had a high fever. How many times? I thought with growing rage. How many damn times did Gavin tell those lies to my daughter? I wondered how many nights Rachel had fallen asleep hating me with all her heart for something I never did. How many times did she curse me in silence for an abandonment that only existed in her manipulative fiancé's rotten head? All these long and painful years I thought my daughter despised me because Amanda had put ideas in her head during the divorce. But now I understood it was not just Amanda to blame for everything. It was him principally. It was this man who now danced with her in his arms as if she were a trophy belonging to him. "How did you get these messages?" I asked Bernard with a hoarse voice, needing to understand how this information reached his hands. He leaned back in the chair and crossed his arms before answering. The waiter who passed them to me also works at the golf club where Gerald and Gavin meet every weekend, he explained calmly. This boy had heard very suspicious conversations between them for months, things that did not add up. One day, Gavin left his cell phone unlocked on a table while going to the bathroom, and the waiter took the opportunity to photograph the screen with this conversation. He paused and looked me directly in the eyes. That waiter owes me favors from many years ago, and that is why he brought me this information. At first I thought about doing nothing with it, letting things take their natural course. But when I saw you arrive at this wedding and then saw you with your face buried in that cake while everyone laughed at you like hyenas, I knew I could not stay silent. It was not fair. I felt the puzzle pieces starting to fit in my mind in a terrible and painful way. Gerald stole everything from me 20 years ago with his lies and forgeries, and now his son was doing exactly the same to me, but in a much crueler and more ruthless way. Gavin was not stealing money or business contracts from me like his father did. He was stealing something much more valuable. He was stealing my daughter. He was taking away the possibility of having a father who loved her. He was systematically poisoning her mind to hate me with all her soul so he could calmly keep what he believed was my hidden fortune when I died. It is the same damn plan as always. I thought with fists clenched under the table. Destroy Lawrence Miller, father and son, working together as partners in crime to finish me off once and for all. I looked up toward the dance floor, where Rachel and Gavin continued receiving congratulations from guests with fake smiles. She smiled for the photos, but now I saw that smile in a completely different way than I had seen it before. It was not the genuine smile of a happy woman in love on her wedding day. It was the mechanical smile of a woman trapped in an invisible cage, a woman who believed with all her heart she was, with the love of her life, but in reality was sleeping with her worst enemy every night. I felt a wave of pain so strong and devastating I had to grab the edge of the table not to fall off the chair. My little girl, I thought with my eyes burning from tears I did not want to release. My little Rachel, the same one who hugged my neck when she was tiny and told me I was her king. Now she was marrying a man who only saw her as a lottery ticket to become a millionaire at my expense. "What are you going to do, Lawrence?" Bernard asked me with a grave voice, breaking the silence that had settled between us like a wall. I looked him in the eye and told him the most honest truth I could say at that moment. I do not know. For the first time in my life, I genuinely do not know what to do. And it was true, my mind was a total chaos of contradictory emotions. If I spoke and exposed the truth in front of everyone, I destroyed my daughter's wedding and exposed her to the most horrible public shame imaginable. If I kept quiet and left in silence like a coward, I left her in the hands of a hungry wolf who was going to devour her as soon as he had the opportunity. There was no good option between the two. There was no path that did not end in pain for someone. I put my hands to my face and took several deep breaths, trying to think clearly. But the only thing I saw in my mind was my daughter's face when she was a child, looking at me with those huge eyes and innocently asking me why the sky was blue. Then I remembered something that hit me like lightning. A night many years ago when Rachel was 8 or 9 years old, she asked me something very serious while I tucked her into bed before sleep. "Dad," she told me with her little girl voice, "what would you do if someone hurt me?" The question took me by surprise, and I stayed thinking a few seconds before answering. "I would protect you always, my love," I told her, stroking her hair. "Whatever happened, no matter the cost, no matter anything else." She looked at me with those big eyes full of absolute trust, and asked me another question that pierced my soul. "And does that mean you are never going to abandon me?" I promised her I would never abandon her. I swore on my life that I would always be there for her, even if she did not see me, even if she thought I had gone, even if she believed I had forgotten her. And now, so many years later, that promise I made to my girl was still as valid as the first day, more valid than ever. My daughter does not hate me. I said out loud, and the words hit me with the force of a train at full speed. They taught her to hate me. Bernard nodded slowly, saying nothing, letting me process the revelation at my own pace. All this damn time I thought Rachel's contempt for me was genuine, that she had chosen of her own free will to believe the worst of her father, that she had judged and condemned me without giving me a chance to defend myself. But it was not like that. They deceived her vilely from the beginning. They put rotten lies in her head from the first day she started dating Gavin. They made her believe her father was a heartless monster, so she would not trust him, so she would not approach to ask for advice, so she would not listen if one day I tried to warn her about something. And all this so that when the moment came to fight for my supposed millionaire inheritance, she would be firmly on their side and not mine. It was a coldly calculated plan, ruthless to the core, executed with surgical precision for years. I felt something very deep change inside me at that moment, like a switch turning on after being off for decades. The pain was still there, stuck in my chest, but now it came accompanied by something else much more powerful: clarity. For the first time in all that horrible night, I saw the complete situation with absolute and crystal clarity. I could not stay silent like a coward. I could not leave crawling in silence and let my daughter live the rest of her life inside a monstrous lie. I could not allow, under any circumstances, that Gavin and his father get away with it once more, that they defeat me again after 20 years. I had spent 2 entire decades in total silence to protect Rachel from pain, and that cowardly silence had only served for them to push her further and further away from me with their lies. Enough. I thought, clenching my fists with renewed strength. It is time to speak once and for all. It is time for the truth to come to light and destroy all their lies. I looked Bernard directly in the eyes and told him with a firm and decided voice, "I changed my mind. I want you to go up on stage." He raised his eyebrows, surprised by my sudden change. "Are you completely sure, Lawrence?" he asked me. "Once this comes out, there is no turning back." I nodded once with my head without hesitating a second. "I want the entire room to know who I really am, and I want them to know who the Fosters are and what they have been planning all this time." Bernard held my gaze for several long seconds, making sure I was speaking completely seriously and was not going to regret it halfway. Then he nodded once solemnly and stood up with slow and deliberate movements. He buttoned his jacket, calmly adjusted his silver hair with his hand, and started walking toward the stage. But then I stopped him. "Wait," I told him. Something told me it was not the moment yet. I got up and walked toward the door of the hall. I needed air, I needed to think. I reached the door and put my hand on the handle when I heard a voice behind me that stopped me dead. It was Rachel. My daughter was standing a few yards from me in the hallway with her white dress shining under the lights, as if she were an angel who had just descended from heaven to speak with me. She was looking at me with an expression I had not seen on her face in many years, maybe since she was a little girl who still loved me. It was not the cold contempt of a few hours ago when she ignored me. It was not the glacial indifference with which she had treated me all night as if I were a stranger. It was something completely different, something softer, more fragile, more human and vulnerable, something that looked a lot like genuine regret, or perhaps fear of losing something important forever. Her eyes were wet with contained tears, and her hands were clasped tightly in front of her chest, as if she were gathering all her courage to take the next step toward me. And then she took it. She walked toward where I was with slow and unsure steps, like a little girl timidly approaching a father she has not seen in a long time, and does not know how he is going to react. She stopped in front of me less than a yard away and looked me directly in the eyes for the first time all night. I could see the tears forming in her dark eyes, shining under the hallway light like small crystals of pain. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She closed it. She opened it again with effort, and then pronounced a single word that pierced my chest like a cannonball and left me breathless. "Dad." Just like that, without more explanation. Dad. Like when she was a little girl and called me scared from her room in the middle of the night because she had a horrible nightmare and needed me to protect her. Like when she fell off her bicycle learning to ride and ran to me crying for me to cure her scraped knees. Dad. That sacred word I had gone so many years without hearing from her lips that I had almost forgotten how it sounded coming from her. And then she added another word that split my soul in 2 halves. "Forgive me." Her voice broke completely on the last syllable of that word, and the tears she had been holding back began to roll down her cheeks uncontrollably, leaving shiny furrows in her perfect bridal makeup. She did not wipe them with her hands. She did not try to hide them from me or pretend she was crying. She just stood there in front of me crying in silence while I watched her, paralyzed, unable to move an inch, not knowing what to do or what to say. My daughter was asking for my forgiveness. My daughter, the same one who had not spoken to me in whole years, no matter how many times I tried to contact her. My daughter, the same one who had looked at me with absolute contempt while her fiancé shoved my face in the cake and everyone laughed at me. Now that same daughter was standing in front of me with her beautiful wedding dress stained with tears, humbly asking me to forgive her. I felt something very big unlock inside my chest with a long and painful crack like a heavy door that had been padlocked for decades, and suddenly someone burst it open. "Why are you asking for forgiveness, daughter?" I asked her with a hoarse voice, although I already intuited the answer in my heart. She lowered her gaze to the floor and began to speak with a trembling voice broken by sobs. "Because I know they treated you very badly tonight, Dad. What happened with the cake was horrible, it was cruel, it was inhumane. I should have said something to defend you, but I did not dare. I stayed silent like a miserable coward while everyone laughed at my own father at my own wedding." Tears continued falling down her cheeks as she spoke. "Everything has been very confusing these years, Dad. Gavin told me so many terrible things about you that I no longer knew what was true and what was a lie. But when I saw you wiping your face in silence after the cake thing, without shouting, without making a scene, without insulting anyone, although you had all the right in the world, I felt something break inside me, something that had been cracked for a long time and finally broke into pieces." Rachel looked up and looked at me with eyes red and swollen from crying so much. "When I saw you walk toward the door of the hall to leave," she told me with a broken voice, "with your back straight and head high, despite everything horrible they had done to you, I felt panic, a terrible panic that paralyzed my entire body, panic that you would leave forever, and I would never see you again, panic of having lost my father without even having given him the chance to defend himself, to tell his version of the story. At that moment I understood something very important." She paused to take a breath between sobs. "I understood that maybe, just maybe, what they had told me about you all these years was not the whole truth, that there was another version I never wanted to hear, and I needed to tell you before you disappeared from my life forever, Dad. I needed to at least try to fix something of everything that broke between us. Do you forgive me?" I felt my heart return to my chest after years of having it completely dead and empty. My girl, my little Rachel. After so much time of cruel distance, of phone calls she never answered, of text messages she never replied to, of birthday gifts, she returned unopened, of whole years of silence and rejection now stood in front of me, opening up for the first time, showing me her vulnerability, asking for forgiveness. I wanted to hug her with all my strength and never let go. I wanted to tell her I loved her with all my heart, that I never stopped loving her a single day of all these years, even if she hated me, that everything I did was always to protect her, even if she did not know or understand it. I wanted to tell her the whole truth about Gavin and his cursed father, about the poisonous lies they had put in her head to distance her from me, about the sinister plan to steal what they believed was my hidden fortune. But before I could say a single word, I heard footsteps approaching quickly behind her down the hallway. Furious footsteps, fast, determined, filled with barely contained rage. It was Gavin. He appeared in the hallway like a threatening shadow, and planted himself behind my daughter with an expression of murderous fury he did not try to hide. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out, and his eyes shone, lit with anger like a demon's. "What the hell are you doing here, Rachel?" he asked with a voice sharp as a knife. "Why did you leave the guests alone? Why are you wasting time with this useless old man?" His voice was a whip, cutting the air between us with every word. I saw Rachel tense immediately upon hearing him, how her body went rigid with fear. The emotional opening I had seen in her a moment ago disappeared completely, as if someone had closed a curtain. Her eyes went dull. Her body shrank. "I just wanted to say goodbye to my dad," she told him with a weak and submissive voice, almost a whisper. Gavin let out a contemptuous and cruel laugh that froze the blood in my veins and filled me with a homicidal rage I had not felt in decades. "Say goodbye to him?" he said with a mocking tone. "This old man is not worth even 5 minutes of your time, Rachel. He is a failure who abandoned you 20 years ago without looking back, and now appears here to ruin our wedding with his pathetic presence. He does not even deserve you looking at him." Then he did something that filled me with a fury so intense I had to dig my nails into my palms not to throw myself on him and kill him with my own hands. He grabbed her arm with brute force, with much more force than necessary. I saw with horrible clarity how his fingers dug into the white skin of my daughter's arm like claws. I saw how they left deep white marks that I was sure would turn purple bruises tomorrow. "Let's get out of here," he ordered, dragging her. "The guests are waiting for us. Do not ruin your own wedding because of a guy who never loved you." I saw Rachel make an almost imperceptible grimace of pain when Gavin's fingers dug into her arm with more force. I saw her eyes fill with tears again, but these tears were completely different from before. They were not tears of regret or emotion. They were tears of pure fear, of terror. I saw her lower her gaze to the floor immediately and nod submissively without daring to protest a word, as if she were completely used to obeying without questioning. as if she knew from experience that resisting was only going to make things worse and bring worse consequences. And in that terrible moment I understood something that froze my blood to the bones and turned my stomach with horror. My daughter was not only deceived by that man's lies, she was controlled. She was completely trapped like a bird in a cage. Gavin held her prisoner in a web of lies, manipulation, and probably violence too, so dense and suffocating that she no longer knew how to escape, nor had the strength to try. Rachel looked at me one last time over her shoulder before turning around to follow Gavin, and in that brief but intense look I saw absolutely everything I needed to see. I saw a silent apology for not being able to stay. I saw a desperate plea for help she did not know how to express with words. I saw a scared little girl asking for help without knowing how to ask, trapped in a nightmare from which she could not find the exit. I saw my daughter prisoner of a monster that was destroying her slowly, day after day. I wanted to scream with all my strength. I wanted to run to her, rip her from that wretched bastard's arms, and take her far away from there forever, to a safe place where he could never find her. But Rachel was already turning around obediently. She was already following Gavin back to the party hall with her head down and shoulders slumped in, defeat dragging the long tail of the white dress on the floor like a defeated prisoner returning meekly to her cell after a brief moment of freedom. And I stayed there completely alone in the hallway with my hand still on the cold door handle, watching helplessly as my daughter walked away on the arm of the man who was destroying her. I let go of the door handle. I could not leave. Not after having seen that with my own eyes. Not after seeing Gavin's fingers digging into my daughter's arm, leaving marks. Not after seeing the animal fear shining in her eyes when he appeared behind her. Not after seeing how that wretch had turned my Rachel, my happy girl full of life, into a dull shadow, into a sad ghost of the strong and free woman she should be. My daughter had asked for my forgiveness with tears in her eyes. My daughter had taken the first brave step to approach me after so many endless years of silence and distance. And that unhappy bastard had dragged her back to her cage in less than a minute, right in front of my eyes, without me being able to do anything to stop it. No, I thought, clenching my fists with strength. It is not enough to leave in silence like a coward. It is not enough to protect her from afar while she suffers. I have to stay here. I have to show my daughter who the real enemy is she has by her side. I have to get her out of that deadly trap before it is too late, before he destroys her completely and there is nothing left of her to save. I returned to the hall with a determination I had not felt in 20 long years of silence and waiting. Every step I took was firm, decided, with purpose, as if my shoes hit the marble floor with the force of a hammer driving the last nail. The music kept playing happily as if nothing had happened. The guests continued laughing at their tables, oblivious to everything. The waiters continued serving champagne with professional smiles. Everything seemed exactly the same as before, but I was completely different. I was no longer the humiliated and pathetic man wiping cream off his face in a service bathroom. I was no longer the invisible and forgotten father who meekly accepted his place by the kitchen door like an old piece of furniture. Now I was Lawrence Miller, the man who had built an empire in silence and was about to remind everyone in that room who I really was. I searched for Bernard with my gaze and found him near the stage, watching me intently with a half-smile of satisfaction, as if he had known all along that I was going to come back, and that this time nothing and no one was going to stop me. I crossed the room, walking in a straight line without looking at anyone, without deviating an inch from my path. I passed my brother Stephen's table and felt his eyes follow me with nervous curiosity, probably wondering what the hell was happening and why I walked like that. I passed the table where Amanda and Gerald were sitting, so busy talking to each other in low voices they did not even notice I passed less than a yard away. I reached where Bernard was waiting for me and told him point blank. I changed my mind. Go up on stage. Show everyone the truth, once and for all. He stared at me for a few seconds, ensuring with that penetrating gaze that I was completely sure of what I was asking, and that I was not going to regret it halfway. Then he nodded once solemnly and told me, "It was time, Lawrence. It was time." He adjusted his jacket with an elegant movement, ran his hand through his silver hair, and walked toward the stage steps with the majestic bearing of a man used to commanding the attention of any room he entered. Bernard went up on stage and took the microphone. His amplified voice cut the music abruptly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to propose a toast. I have been waiting all night for the right moment." He made a dramatic pause. "I want to toast to a man who taught me what it means to work with honor. A man who never showed off anything, although he had much to show off." The silence was total. Lawrence Miller. A murmur of surprise ran through the tables. Gavin paled and looked at his father with alarm. Very few here know the true story of Lawrence Miller, Bernard continued. You probably see him as a simple man without great achievements. But you are wrong, completely wrong. The man sitting next to the kitchen is the owner of the largest hotel chain in Central America. 40 properties in 6 countries. Thousands of employees. $1 million contracts. An empire built in silence because that is how his father taught him a real man should live. The room froze. Amanda opened her mouth without making a sound. Stephen choked on his drink. Gerald squeezed his glass so hard I thought it would break. And Gavin turned the color of wax. But Bernard had not finished his presentation yet. He took his cell phone out of the inside pocket of his jacket and connected it to the room's projection system with confident movements of someone who had planned this in advance. Suddenly, on the giant screen where romantic photos of the couple were supposed to play during the party, a completely different image appeared. It was a photo of me cutting a red inaugural ribbon in front of a 15-story hotel in Panama City surrounded by applauding executives. The next photo showed me signing an important contract with suited executives of an international airline, all smiling for the camera. The next image was me receiving a Crystal Award from the Guatemalan Chamber of Commerce for contribution to tourism development. Photo after photo, document after document, the complete truth of my secret life unfolded before the astonished and open-mouthed eyes of all the guests who an hour ago had laughed at me. Rachel looked at the giant screen with her mouth open in astonishment and eyes wide, unable to believe what she was seeing. Tears ran down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup, but she made no effort to wipe them, completely hypnotized by the images. I saw her put her hand to her chest, firmly pressing on her heart as if something very deep hurt inside, and she needed to contain it. I saw her turn to look at Gavin with an expression of confusion, then at her mother, then again at the screen, trying desperately to understand how absolutely everything they had told her about me for years could be so brutally false, so completely invented. Her father was not a pathetic failure who abandoned her without looking back. Her father was a successful man who had built an impressive empire while she hated him for cruel lies others told her to manipulate her. "My God," I heard her murmur. "My God, what did I do?" Gavin jumped up from the table, violently knocking his chair back, and tried to walk toward the stage with furious steps, probably to rip the microphone from Bernard's hands or disconnect the projector before it showed more evidence, but Gerald stopped him, grabbing him tightly by the arm and pulling him down. "Sit down," he told him between his teeth in a low but threatening voice. "Do not make things worse, it is already too late." I saw Gavin clench his fists with impotent rage, with knuckles white from the force. I saw him look at his father with pleading eyes, waiting for instructions that did not come, waiting for the old man to tell him what to do to get out of this disaster. But Gerald had no answers. For the first time all night, the great Gavin Foster, the self-assured man who shoved my face in the cake while everyone laughed, was now completely paralyzed with fear, watching helplessly as his perfect plan crumbled before his own eyes like a house of cards. Bernard remained silent for a few long and dramatic seconds, letting the crushing weight of the revelation settle completely in the room like an anvil falling on every head. Then he lowered his voice to almost a whisper that the microphones amplified perfectly and said something that made the atmosphere become even more tense. "But there is something else you must know. I have very important information about why Gavin Foster chose Rachel specifically as his wife, and I assure you it has absolutely nothing to do with love, nor with destiny's coincidences, nor with romance." The room fell into sepulchral silence, so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights. I saw Gavin pale even more, if that was humanly possible, with drops of sweat breaking out on his forehead. I saw Gerald stand up from his chair abruptly with an expression of total alarm, as if he wanted to run to the stage to stop what was coming. And I saw Rachel, my daughter, turn slowly toward her brand-new husband with a terrible and accusing question forming clearly in her eyes. Bernard looked at me from the stage and nodded at me, indicating it was my turn to speak. He had masterfully prepared the ground during the last few minutes, had dropped the bomb of my true identity, had violently shaken the foundations of the lie the Fosters had built for years. Now it was my turn to finish the play and deliver the final blow. I stood up from my chair next to the kitchen, feeling my legs firmer and surer than ever in my life. I walked toward the stage with my gaze fixed on the front without deviating an inch, without doubting a second of what I was going to do. The guests moved aside to let me pass as if I were a completely different person from the one they had seen before, as if the man now walking among them with a decided step was not the same one they had seen humiliated just an hour ago. And they were absolutely right. I was no longer the same man. That man had died in the service bathroom, but the worst for Gavin was not seeing me walk toward the stage with that determination. The worst came immediately after. I went up the stage steps, feeling the weight of all the eyes in the room stuck on me like hundreds of pins. Bernard handed me the microphone with a respectful nod and stepped aside to leave me center stage. I stood there in front of 200 people who just an hour ago saw me as a poor devil, worthy of pity and mockery, and who now did not know what to think or how to process what they had just discovered. The silence was so dense and heavy I could hear my own breathing amplified by the sound system speakers. I looked toward the newlyweds' table and found Gavin's eyes immediately. He was pale as a corpse, with his jaw clenched so tight the muscles stood out and hands closed in fists on the table as if ready to fight. Beside him, Rachel looked at me with a mixture of deep confusion and intense pain that broke my heart into pieces. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with courage, and started speaking with the calmest and most controlled voice I could find inside me. "I am not going to shout," I said with a firm and clear voice. "I am not going to insult anyone or use bad words. I am not here to make a scene or ruin a party." I paused to make sure everyone was listening carefully. "I am here to tell the truth. A truth I kept in silence for 20 long years to protect my daughter from pain I believed necessary at that moment. But I can no longer stay silent." I looked directly at Gerald while continuing. 20 years ago I had a business partner named Gerald Foster, a man I considered my closest friend, my soul brother. Together we planned to build what was going to be my first hotel. We worked 3 full years on that project day and night, dreaming of the future, trusting blindly in each other. Until one day I arrived at our office early in the morning and found everything completely empty. Desks, files, computers, everything had disappeared. And Gerald had disappeared with everything, every document, every contract, every signature I had placed. I kept my gaze fixed directly on Gerald as I spoke. He sat in his chair like a stone statue, completely immobile, with his face red from shame or rage, and eyes glued to the table, not daring to look at me. Gerald Foster forged my signature on multiple documents. I continued with a voice that did not tremble. He bribed a corrupt notary to certify fraudulent papers. He kept the entire project we built together for 3 years and put it in his name as if it were only his. The hotel I dreamed of and designed opened a year later, but with his name on the deed, not mine. I heard murmurs of indignation running through the room. He left me on the street without money, without anything, with a huge debt I could not pay, while he became a millionaire with my work. I paused again. I never reported him publicly, not because I had forgiven him, because I never forgave him, but because by the time I gathered the strength and necessary proof to do so, my daughter Rachel was already dating that man's son, and I did not want her to pay for the sins of her future father-in-law. Murmurs of indignation began to run through the room like a river rising after a storm. I saw guests turn toward where Gerald was with expressions of surprise and open disapproval, some shaking their heads. I saw several take out their cell phones and start recording everything I said, probably to upload it to social media later. But I had not finished yet. I looked directly into Gavin's eyes and told him what I had been wanting to tell him since I read those messages. "And you, Gavin, continued your father's criminal legacy in the worst possible way." He tensed visibly in his chair. "I saw the messages you sent your father talking about me. I saw how you talked about my supposed hidden inheritance. I saw how you planned to keep all my money when I died." My voice hardened. "I know perfectly well that you never loved my daughter. That from day one you only saw her as a ticket to a fortune you believed I had hidden somewhere." Gavin jumped to his feet violently and shouted with a desperate voice that sounded almost hysterical. "That is a lie. He is inventing all this to ruin my wedding. He is a crazy and resentful old man who wants revenge because his daughter abandoned him." His voice broke mid-sentence, betraying his panic. I replied with absolute calm that contrasted with his hysteria. "It is not a lie, Gavin. I have all the proof in my possession. Every message is documented with date and time. I can show it right now if necessary." He turned desperately to look at his father, seeking support, looking for Gerald to get up and defend him, but the old man had his gaze fixed on the floor and did not move a muscle, completely defeated. Then Gavin looked at Rachel, his brand-new wife of a few hours, as if expecting her to take his side and defend him from his own father's accusations. But Rachel was not looking at him. She was looking at me, and in her eyes I saw she was starting to believe every word coming out of my mouth. I lowered the tone of my voice and spoke directly to my daughter, with all the love I had kept in my heart. "Rachel, my love, I deeply regret having to tell you all this on your wedding day. I would have preferred 1,000 times to do it in private, just you and me calmly. I felt my voice break, but forced myself to continue. But I could no longer stay silent, not one more day seeing you trapped in a monstrous lie. I paused to control my emotions. Gavin filled your head with completely false stories about me for years. He told you I had abandoned you for another woman when the truth is exactly the opposite. Tears burned in my eyes, but I did not let them fall. I left the house to protect you from a brutal divorce trial so you would not have to sit in a cold court and hear your parents destroy each other with horrible accusations. I signed everything your mother asked for without fighting because I did not want you to suffer. My voice broke. But every day of these 20 years I thought of you, my girl. I missed you every morning. I prayed for you every night. Rachel had tears running freely down her cheeks, completely ruining her bridal makeup without caring in the least. She put a trembling hand to her mouth, trying to contain a sob that threatened to escape. I clearly saw how she processed each of my words with pain, how the gears of her mind finally connected the pieces of a puzzle that had been incomplete for years and she had never been able to solve. Then she looked at Gavin with an expression I had never seen on her before all night. It was not sadness or pain or confusion. It was something much colder, much harder, much more dangerous. It was the expression of someone who just discovered that the person they trusted most in the world, the person they just married, lied to them blatantly about absolutely everything from the first day they met. Gavin must have seen something terrible in that look because he tried to take her hand to calm her, but she pulled it away with a violent jerk, as if contact with him burned her skin. Then I looked Gavin directly in the eyes from the stage and told him the words I had wanted to say all night, the words I had rehearsed in my head while wiping cream off my face in that miserable bathroom. You wanted my money, Gavin. That was your plan from the first moment you met my daughter, to inherit what you believed I had hidden somewhere. My voice was firm as steel, but there is something you never had and never will have, no matter how hard you try. I made a dramatic pause. You never had my daughter's true respect. You never had her genuine love, because real love is not built on lies and manipulation. Love is built on truth. I held his gaze without blinking. And that, Gavin Foster, that which I have and you will never have, cannot be bought with all the money in the world. That is earned with honesty, with truth, with years of silent sacrifice. And you never had it. Never. Gavin opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. He stood next to the table like an idiot with arms hanging by his sides, looking up at me with a mixture of pure hate and total defeat that gave me more satisfaction than I want to admit. For the first time all night, the great Gavin Foster had nothing intelligent to say, no arrogant answer to give. Then I heard a sound behind him that made me turn immediately. It was Rachel. My daughter had stood up from her chair and was looking at Gavin with red eyes from crying so much, but completely dry now, as if she had no more tears left to shed for that man. Slowly, with very deliberate and calculated movements, she brought her left hand to her right and started taking off her wedding ring while the entire room watched, holding their breath. The ring came off Rachel's finger with a small tug and was free in her open palm. She held it there for a few long and silent seconds, staring at it as if it were a strange and unknown object, something that no longer belonged to her and she should never have accepted. Then she walked with determined steps to where Gavin stood next to the table and dropped the ring in front of him without any ceremony. The gold ring bounced on the wooden surface with a dry, metallic sound that echoed in the entire silent room like a sentence. Rachel looked him straight in the eyes with an expression of ice and told him with a firm and clear voice that filled me with paternal pride. You never loved me, Gavin, never. You only wanted what you thought my father had hidden. You used me from day one. Her voice did not tremble a bit, but I am not a prize to be won, nor a lottery ticket to be cashed. I am a person, and this that you call marriage is over. It is over before it started. Gavin tried to speak desperately to save the situation. He raised his hands in a pathetic gesture of pleading and started babbling rushed words. Rachel, my love, wait. All this is a terrible misunderstanding. I can explain everything. I really love you. You have to believe me. But no one in that room was listening to him anymore, nor believed a single word. Guests murmured among themselves in low voices, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others looking at him with open contempt and without hiding it. Gerald remained seated in his chair as if nailed there, unable to move or open his mouth. Amanda had put her hands to her face and did not look up, probably wishing the earth would swallow her. And Rachel, my brave daughter, turned her back on Gavin without answering anything, and walked toward the stage where I stood waiting for her with the white wedding dress dragging behind her on the floor like the luminous tail of a comet that finally found its way back home. Rachel went up the stage steps with slow but sure paces and stopped in front of me less than a yard away. We looked directly into each other's eyes for several long seconds charged with emotion, saying absolutely nothing, like two people finally reuniting after a very long and painful journey on separate paths. I clearly saw in her eyes everything she had not told me. In 20 years of distance and silence, the accumulated pain, the confusion that consumed her for years, the deep regret for having believed so many cruel lies about her own father, without giving him a chance to defend himself. And she saw in my eyes what I also could not tell her. In all that time, the unconditional love that never died a single day, the infinite patience with which I waited for this moment, the desperate desire to protect her even if that meant letting her go and losing her. Then Rachel took a step forward, closed the distance between us, and hugged me. She hugged me with all her strength, burying her face in my chest like when she was a little girl, trembling with deep sobs that seemed to come from deep inside her soul. I held her in my arms tightly, feeling that something broken and bleeding for many years finally began to repair, to heal, to return, to be what it should always have been. My girl, my little Rachel, the same one who told me with her little girl, the voice that I was her king when I carried her on my shoulders and took her for a walk in the park, the same one who hugged my neck and did not want to let go when I left her at school. Now that girl-turned-woman was there in my arms, crying against my chest, wetting my suit with her tears, asking me for forgiveness over and over with a completely broken voice. "Forgive me, Dad. Forgive me, please. Forgive me for everything." I stroked her hair gently as I did when she was small, and whispered in her ear with a trembling voice, "There is nothing to forgive, my love. Nothing. I understand perfectly why you believed what they told you. It was not your fault." I squeezed her tighter. "The only thing I want is for you to live free from now on, to be truly happy, to not let anyone else fill your head with lies, and to know that I will always be here for you, my girl. Always. Whatever happens." I heard movement and murmurs in the room and looked up without letting go of Rachel. My brother had stood up from his table and was walking toward the stage, with a very uncomfortable expression, as if he wanted to say something important but did not know how to start or what words to use. I saw him approach with hesitant and unsure steps, dragging his feet, and stop at the foot of the stage steps, looking up at me with a pathetic mixture of deep shame and desperate pleading shining in his wet eyes. He opened his mouth several times without sound coming out, and finally started babbling with a trembling voice. "Lawrence, brother, I did not know anything about this, I swear to God. I never imagined that if I had understood what was really happening, I would have acted completely differently. You have to believe me." His voice broke mid-pathetic sentence, and he stayed silent, waiting for my reaction, with eyes shining with contained tears, like a dog waiting for its master to forgive it after doing something bad. I stared at him for several long, heavy seconds, saying absolutely nothing, letting the silence speak for me. I thought of all the years I helped him without asking for anything in return, without expecting gratitude, without keeping score. I thought of the money I lent him when he lost everything in that disastrous business, of the endless nights I spent awake worrying about him and his children, of the sacred promise I made to our father on his deathbed to always take care of my younger brother, whatever happened. And I thought of how he had repaid all that loyalty and love, laughing out loud along with the man who humiliated me, publicly toasting with champagne with my executioner, as if they were best friends, ignoring me completely while I wiped cream off my face in a service bathroom. Finally, I spoke with a cold but controlled voice. "Stephen Blood is not chosen. You are my brother and always will be, until the day I die. That is never going to change." I paused. "But loyalty is chosen, and you chose wrong tonight, very wrong." Stephen lowered his gaze to the floor and nodded, slowly accepting my harsh words as the blow they were, as the sentence he deserved. He said nothing more in his defense, because there was nothing he could say to change what he had done. He turned around slowly and walked back to his table with shoulders slumped and head down, like a man who just lost something very important and valuable and knows deep in his heart he probably won't ever get it back. I felt a sharp pang of sadness watching him walk away, like that, defeated and alone, but I felt not a drop of regret for the words I told him. They were completely true, and he needed to hear them. Maybe someday in the future we could try to rebuild something of our sibling relationship, but that day was definitely not today. Today I had other much more important priorities. Today I had to take care of my daughter and close painful chapters that had been open and bleeding for too long. Bernard approached the stage walking with his elegant step and handed me a large manila envelope he had in his hand. "This is for you, Lawrence," he told me with a respectful nod. "Here is everything you need for the next step." I opened the envelope with hands trembling slightly with anticipation, and found inside a legal document of several pages with many stamps and signatures. It was a formal and complete complaint against Gerald Foster for business fraud, forgery of public and private documents, and illicit appropriation of others' assets. It was all detailed with legal precision, with specific dates, exact amounts of money, full names of witnesses willing to testify. Bernard explained in a low voice. "I hired a team of the best lawyers several months ago to prepare all this. I was waiting for the right moment to give it to you, Lawrence, and after tonight, after 20 years of injustice, I think that moment has finally arrived." I looked up from the document and looked toward where Gerald Foster was sitting. The man who stole everything from me 20 years ago remained nailed to his chair, as if his body was paralyzed, with his face completely gray like a corpse and eyes empty of all expression, looking at nothing, like a man who knows with absolute certainty that his time of impunity finally ran out. He no longer had a trace of the arrogant and satisfied smile he wore just a few hours ago when he toasted with champagne at the head table. He no longer slapped backs or told jokes or bragged about his successful son. Now he was just a scared and pathetic old man watching helplessly as the truth finally caught up with him after 2 decades of escaping consequences. I held his gaze fixedly for several long silent seconds, letting him understand with crystal clarity what was coming for him. Then I put the document carefully in the inside pocket of my jacket and turned around. There would be enough time for lawyers, courts, and justice. Right now I had something much more important to do with my time. I went down the stage steps with Rachel holding firmly to my arm, leaning on me as if I were the only solid thing in her world that had just collapsed completely. The guests watched us pass in respectful silence, some with expressions of genuine admiration, others with morbid curiosity. The vast majority still dazed, processing everything they had heard and seen in the last few minutes. I saw Amanda standing next to her table when we passed nearby, with her face pale as paper and lips pressed in a thin line, staring at me with a strange expression, as if she saw me for the first time in her life and did not recognize the man before her. I did not say a single word to her. I had absolutely nothing to say to her after so many years. She had made her decisions 2 decades ago, and I mine. Now each of us would carry the consequences of those decisions for the rest of our lives. I kept walking without stopping toward the exit of the hall, with my daughter leaning on my shoulder, feeling her comforting warmth against my side, feeling that I finally had her back. We went out together into the fresh, clean night air, and I took a deep breath for the first time in many hours, filling my lungs with freedom. The sky was completely clear above our heads, and hundreds of stars could be seen shining intensely among the distant city lights like small diamonds scattered on black velvet. Rachel was still clinging to my arm with both hands, as if she were afraid I would disappear into thin air if she let go even for a second. I told her with a soft and affectionate voice, "Everything is going to be okay, my love, I promise. We are going to get through this together, you and me. We have a lot of lost time to make up for, I know. But the important thing is that now we are on the same side, on the side of truth." She nodded without saying anything with words, just squeezing my arm harder as a response, communicating with that gesture everything she could not yet express with her voice. I saw an elegant black car parked in front of the banquet hall entrance, and immediately recognized my trusted chauffeur, Jason, waiting patiently, standing next to the driver's door with hands crossed in front of his body. He had been working for me for over 15 years with absolute loyalty, and was one of the very few people in the world who knew my true financial situation and my secret life. He saw me leave the hall with Rachel on my arm and nodded once with his head in recognition, without asking any indiscreet questions, without making any comment on my appearance or the woman in the white dress accompanying me. He simply opened the back door of the car so we could get in comfortably, and then got behind the wheel in professional silence, waiting for my instructions. Before entering the car, I stopped a moment and looked at the starry sky one last time, breathing deeply the fresh air of freedom. I felt something very heavy I had been carrying for decades finally release inside my chest and rise toward the stars. Sometimes the worst humiliation of your life turns out to be the first step toward true freedom. If you were ever treated as less than you are worth, if you were ever humiliated in public and made to feel you were nobody, I want you to remember something very important. Do not defend yourself with desperate screams. Do not defend yourself with insults or blows or violence. Defend yourself with the truth. The truth is the most powerful weapon that exists in this world because it cannot be destroyed with lies or hidden forever, no matter how hard they try. And if someone humiliates you in front of everyone, if someone makes you feel you are worth absolutely nothing, do not despair or lose faith. Let time speak for you, because time always, always puts everyone in the place they belong. I waited 20 full years of my life for the truth to come to light. 20 years of silence, of patience, of silent pain. And when the truth finally came out, I did not have to scream or fight or insult anyone. I just had to stand in front of everyone and let the truth speak for itself, and it spoke louder than any scream. And you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have faced the truth no matter the cost? Leave me your answer in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think of someone you know or something you lived, I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. Each like, each comment, each subscription helps us continue bringing stories like this. Take care, and see you in the next story.